Britain's nuclear deterrent relies on US-provided and maintained Trident missiles, and on just 4 aging Vanguard submarines, one of which spent 7 years in refit. That does not prove Washington can command a British launch, but it does reveal how little room for error sits behind the word independent. Since April 1969, the Royal Navy has maintained what the government calls Continuous At-Sea Deterrence, or CASD, under Operation Relentless. At least one nuclear-armed ballistic-missile submarine is meant to be on patrol at all times, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The patrol boat is deliberately difficult to find because the deterrent rests on an adversary believing that Britain could still respond after an attack. That mission was first performed by Resolution-class submarines carrying Polaris missiles. Since the mid-1990s, it has rested on 4 Vanguard-class boats: HMS Vanguard, HMS Victorious, HMS Vigilant, and HMS Vengeance. All are based at Naval Base Clyde at Faslane on the Gair Loch west of Glasgow. These are SSBNs, nuclear-powered submarines armed with ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. Their mission is distinct from that of SSNs, the Royal Navy's nuclear-powered but conventionally armed attack submarines. Attack boats hunt submarines, protect naval forces, gather intelligence, and fire conventional weapons. Vanguard's central job is narrower and more consequential. Carry Trident II D5 missiles on a hidden deterrent patrol. Each Vanguard boat is 149.9 meters long, displaces 15,900 tons submerged, and has a crew of 140. Its Rolls-Royce PWR-2 reactor gives it effectively unlimited range in fuel terms. Food, maintenance requirements, and the endurance of its crew decide the length of a patrol. The class was built with 16 missile tubes. Public policy previously limited an operational boat to no more than 8 Trident missiles and 40 warheads, although the government no longer routinely publishes deployed missile and warhead numbers. What matters for CASD isn't simply how many missiles a submarine can carry. It's whether one submarine can always leave port, disappear beneath the sea, and remain there while the other 3 cycle through preparation, recovery, training, maintenance, and refit. 4 submarines are therefore not a surplus. They are the minimum force structure Britain selected to sustain one patrol without permanently exhausting the other 3 boats. One submarine is deployed, another may be preparing for its next patrol. A third may be recovering after months underwater, changing crews, or undergoing shorter maintenance. The fourth is the margin for deep maintenance, refueling, unexpected faults, dockyard work, and disruption in any other part of the cycle. That is why the condition of a single hull can matter to the entire deterrent. The system also depends on components that don't all come from Britain. The submarine hulls are British operated. The nuclear warheads are British. The decision to use them is British, according to the official position. Yet the missile that carries those warheads is American designed, American manufactured, supported through American infrastructure, and sustained through a long-running US-UK agreement. Independence, in other words, isn't one switch marked yes or no. Start with political authority. In a written parliamentary answer published in November 2024, the government stated, "Only the Prime Minister can authorise the use of our nuclear weapons, even if they are to be employed as part of a NATO response." The government also describes the deterrence command and control system as fully independent and says Britain retains full operational control over its use. That claim addresses the most serious question: who gives the order? The official answer is the British Prime Minister. The platforms themselves are also British. The 4 Vanguard SSBNs are operated by the Royal Navy's Faslane flotilla from Clyde. British submariners crew them. British institutions train those crews, maintain the boats, store and handle the weapons at Coolport, and sustain the shore infrastructure needed to put a submarine to sea. Britain also describes its warheads as sovereign. The Atomic Weapons Establishment, with sites at Aldermaston and Burfield, says it designs, develops, manufactures and maintains the nuclear warheads carried by the submarines. Those warheads are integrated onto Trident missiles, but they aren't simply American warheads transferred unchanged to a British boat. That is the British part of the deterrent: political authorization, submarine operation, warhead work, basing, crew training, and much of the industrial infrastructure. Then there is the missile. Trident II D5 is a submarine-launched ballistic missile designed and manufactured in the United States. The US Navy describes it as a three-stage, solid-fuel, inertially guided missile. Its stated range is 4,000 nautical miles. That is about 4,600 miles, sufficient for a submarine in the Atlantic to hold targets far beyond the European continent at risk without approaching an enemy coastline. Lockheed Martin has been a major industrial participant in the D5 program. Britain didn't develop a separate domestic ballistic missile to arm Vanguard. Instead, it entered the American system through the Polaris sales agreement. The original Polaris sales agreement was signed on the 6th of April 1963. It created the framework under which Britain could purchase American missiles, equipment, and supporting services. The arrangement was amended in 1980 for Trident I C4, and again in 1982 after Britain chose the Trident II D5 system. On the 11th of March 1982, President Ronald Reagan wrote to Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher that the United States was prepared to supply to the United Kingdom Trident II missiles, equipment, and supporting services. Those words are precise. They describe supply, equipment, and support. They don't describe an American officer authorizing a British launch. The D5 relationship is built around a shared missile system rather than a separate British missile stock held entirely in Britain. Parliamentary material states that the UK has title to 58 Trident II D5 missile bodies. Those missile bodies are held in a communal pool at the Strategic Weapons Facility Atlantic in Kings Bay, Georgia. That distinction matters. Britain has title to missile bodies, but they are part of a pool maintained through an American facility inside a wider American strategic weapons system. Kings Bay is where the abstract language of interdependence becomes concrete. The Strategic Weapons Facility Atlantic provides strategic missile and strategic weapons system support. British missiles aren't serviced in the United Kingdom. They are returned to Kings Bay for periodic servicing and support. Britain has also made a financial contribution to that facility. A parliamentary answer in 2015 described the annual contribution as approximately £12 million, calculated from the UK share of the missile inventory. A missile body may be British-titled property within the pool. The infrastructure that sustains it isn't British. The United Kingdom also participates with the United States in work to extend the life of Trident II D5. That program addresses obsolescence, maintains missile packages and spares, and is intended to keep the missile available for the next generation of British ballistic missile submarines. This is the first hard limit behind the word independent. Britain operates its submarines, but does not operate an independent D5 servicing complex. Britain manufactures and maintains its warheads, but does not design and manufacture the D5 missile. Britain has title to 58 missile bodies, but those bodies are held in a shared pool at Kings Bay and supported through American facilities. None of that establishes American launch control. The online joke is that Britain has a nuclear subscription service and that Washington can simply end it. That joke compresses several different claims into one misleading image. Some critics and advocacy organizations describe the missiles as leased or rented from the United States. Public parliamentary material uses different terms. The Commons Library says Britain has title to 58 missile bodies. A House of Commons Defence Committee report described the arrangement as one in which the United Kingdom had bought missiles under a pooling system. The Polaris sales agreement itself is framed around purchase, equipment and supporting services. Rented is therefore reported shorthand, not a settled description of the legal arrangement. The public record does not establish that Britain rents individually assigned missiles under an ordinary commercial lease. Yet the correction shouldn't be used to minimise the dependence that is documented. Title to a missile body does not create a domestic British production line. It does not create a British equivalent of Kings Bay. It does not remove the requirement for American missile servicing, American life extension work, American industrial participation, and the agreements that enable access to all of it. The stronger conclusion is more specific. Britain's deterrent isn't legally captured by the word rented, but it is technically tied to the United States in the design, provision, servicing, and life extension of its missile system. What does that relationship prove about the authority to fire the weapon? Publicly available records don't establish a formal American veto over a British Trident launch. They don't establish a US remote kill switch. They don't identify American launch codes that a British crew must obtain before firing. They don't show an American officer directing a British SSBN at sea. Detailed nuclear command and control procedures are classified. That means no outsider can audit every contingency procedure or technical safeguard. But classification isn't evidence for any particular theory. The public evidence supports Britain's stated position that only the Prime Minister authorises use. It also supports a US-linked missile support system. Both facts can coexist. Britain's deterrent is therefore neither a wholly self-contained domestic weapon system nor a publicly demonstrated American-controlled one. The next pressure point is the fleet that must carry those missiles. HMS Vanguard entered service in 1993. HMS Vengeance, the fourth and final boat, entered service in 1999. The original operational life baseline for the Vanguard-class was 25 years. On that basis, the lead boat's expected retirement period began in the late 2010s, while the youngest boat was expected to reach the end of its original life in the mid-2020s. Instead, the class is being extended through the early 2030s. Parliamentary material describes an overall Vanguard lifespan of roughly 37 to 38 years. For HMS Vanguard, that means a boat which entered service in 1993 must remain relevant for almost 4 decades. Age by itself isn't proof of failure. Nuclear submarines are designed for long service. They undergo deep maintenance, replacement of aging components, reactor work, inspections, upgrades, testing, and major dockyard periods. A submarine's calendar age says less than the condition of its machinery, its reactor, its systems, the availability of skilled workers, and the time required to complete the work. But life extension has a cost in flexibility. Every long refit consumes dockyard capacity. Every unexpected technical problem affects maintenance planning. Every year added to a class extends the demand for specialist parts, specialist labour, reactor expertise, trained crews, and industrial infrastructure. CASD makes that burden unusually severe because the mission does not pause while a boat is in a dry dock. HMS Vanguard's deep maintenance period made the problem visible. The Ministry of Defence has stated that its refit and refuelling commenced in February 2016 at HMNB Devonport. It had been planned as a 3.5-year refit. BBC reporting described the actual period as 7.5 years. By 2023, HMS Vanguard had left Devonport and returned to Clyde. But a parliamentary answer in September 2023 made clear that the upkeep project was still continuing through post-refit sea trials. That distinction matters operationally. A submarine leaving the dockyard isn't necessarily ready to resume deterrent patrols. It must complete trials, test systems, validate repairs, prepare crews, and pass the work required before operational deployment. The safest description is that HMS Vanguard spent more than 7 years in deep maintenance from February 2016 into 2023, after a refit planned for 3.5 years expanded to approximately 7.5 years. One of 4 boats had been removed from the normal rotation for a period longer than the original planned refit by 4 years. The force still had 4 submarines on its books. In practical scheduling terms, however, 3 remaining boats had to sustain a mission designed around 4. That does not mean the other 3 submarines were all permanently ready at once. A submarine can be operationally essential while preparing, recovering, undergoing maintenance, training its crew, or waiting for a specific maintenance task. The point is simpler. Removing one hull for years narrows the room available to absorb any disruption affecting the other 3. With 4 boats, the Navy can distribute risk. With 3, a delay on one boat has fewer places to go. A crew returning from a long patrol needs recovery and preparation before another deployment. A submarine needing routine maintenance can't be indefinitely deferred without creating future problems. A boat in deep refit is unavailable for patrol. A fault uncovered during testing can disrupt the cycle again. This is a problem of resilience, not merely arithmetic. The official position remains that CASD has been maintained continuously since 1969. No confirmed public record establishes a break in deterrent patrols during HMS Vanguard's refit. The long maintenance period narrowed the margin. It does not by itself prove that the patrol system failed. The available indicators of strain are more modest, but still significant. One Vanguard-class patrol was reported as lasting 205 days. That is nearly 7 months underwater and away from home. A Royal Navy report on a returning deterrent patrol described a crew of 140 submariners. The service does not routinely confirm every patrol length, boat identity, or operational detail, so the exact circumstances behind an individual long deployment aren't fully public. A 205-day patrol shouldn't be treated as proof that HMS Vanguard's refit directly caused it. No public account establishes that chain of causation. But it is an indicator consistent with the pressure imposed by maintaining a continuous one-boat patrol with a limited number of aging SSBNs. 5 months is longer than an entire season. 205 days means a crew can leave in winter and return in summer, or sail in summer and come home in the following year. The human requirement is part of the deterrence engineering. Families receive only restricted communications during patrols. In one Royal Navy account from a later deterrent patrol return, the mother of a 22-year-old submariner said her family could send 120 words each week, one way, with messages checked for security. That isn't evidence of an operational crisis, it's evidence of what secrecy and continuous availability demand from crews and families across the fleet. Maintenance pressure also reaches beyond the individual submarine. The PWR-2 design was used in the Vanguard-class and in Astute-class attack submarines. In 2018, the decision was taken not to refuel the other 3 Vanguard boats. The public record does not justify a sweeping conclusion about every technical reason behind that decision. It does demonstrate that reactor issues, maintenance choices, testing facilities, dockyard work, and fleet availability can interact across more than one submarine program. A deep refit isn't simply a line in a calendar. It can involve reactor engineering, skilled dockyard teams, safety processes, replacement materials, inspections, sea trials, certification, and work that may be affected by a problem discovered elsewhere in the nuclear enterprise. HMS Vanguard entered service in 1993. Its extended deep maintenance period began in February 2016. It left Devonport in 2023, with post-refit trials continuing. The timeline explains why the arrival of the replacement class matters so much. That replacement is Dreadnought. Dreadnought isn't an attack submarine program. It's a four-boat SSBN program intended to replace the four Vanguard-class ballistic-missile submarines and sustain CASD. The lead boat is named HMS Dreadnought. The first of class is expected to enter service in the early 2030s. Those tubes sit inside a common missile compartment developed with the United States. It's a visible example of how Dreadnought relieves one dependency while retaining another. Dreadnought replaces the British submarine platform. It does not replace the Trident II D5 missile. The United Kingdom remains involved in the D5 life extension program with the United States. The Commons Library has stated that the missile life extension work could keep Trident II D5 in service to the early 2060s. A later US program has been planned to sustain the missile longer still for the American Columbia-class submarines. Dreadnought, therefore, does not create a new, wholly British strategic missile system. It places Britain's existing Trident relationship inside a new generation of British SSBNs. The scale of the programme shows why its timetable matters. The government's estimate for Dreadnought was £31 billion, with a £10 billion contingency. By March 2024, £17.4 billion had been spent on concept, assessment, and early delivery phases. By that point, £3.37 billion of the contingency had been accessed. That money represents more than 4 hulls. It pays for reactor plants, highly specialized steel, missile compartments, dockyard facilities, testing systems, safety infrastructure, training, software, suppliers, and a workforce trained for nuclear-regulated work. That is industrial depth. It also means the program depends on a large number of linked activities being delivered in the right sequence. The Ministry of Defence reported in December 2021 that Dreadnought remained within overall budget and on track for the first boat to enter service in the early 2030s. At the time, it also acknowledged COVID-related uncertainty, challenges in parts of the supply chain, and delayed missile tube deliveries caused by quality shortfalls across suppliers. All 12 missile tubes for HMS Dreadnought had been delivered by then. That was a significant milestone. It was also evidence that a program can remain on its official schedule while still encountering specific industrial problems that require active management. The National Audit Office has identified continuing risks across the wider defence nuclear enterprise involving costs, skills, commercial relationships, and delivery. Separate NAO work on nuclear-regulated infrastructure has highlighted the difficulty of delivering major projects at sites governed by demanding safety and regulatory requirements. Those risk categories shouldn't be converted into a forecast of failure. They describe the conditions under which Dreadnought must be delivered. A program involving rare skills, secure supply chains, large infrastructure projects, complex reactors, and facilities that can't be improvised after a delay appears. The early 2030s remains the official expectation for entry into service. It isn't a guaranteed public date for a completed handover of the entire four-boat force. The new submarines must also connect to a separate warhead program. In February 2020, the government confirmed it was developing a replacement for the sovereign British nuclear warhead. By 2022, that program had entered concept phase. It's distinct from the Dreadnought submarine program, although the future warhead is intended to be compatible with the Trident missile system and to transition from the late 2030s. The British replacement warhead will use US-supplied aeroshells for compatibility with the D5 missile. That does not erase the British role in warhead design and manufacture. It does show that sovereign warhead work still connects to American components at the point where the warhead interfaces with the American missile. This is what the word independence has to carry. Britain has national political authority over nuclear use, according to the government. British submariners operate British SSBNs from Scotland. The Atomic Weapons Establishment designs, manufactures and maintains British nuclear warheads. At the same time, Trident II D5 is American-designed and American-manufactured. Britain's 58 missile bodies are held in a common pool at Kings Bay, Georgia. Their servicing and support depend on US infrastructure. Dreadnought will continue to use D5, and Britain remains part of the US-led work to extend the missile's life. The submarine fleet is also carrying an extended burden. HMS Vanguard entered service in 1993. HMS Vengeance followed in 1999. Their original life baseline was 25 years. The class now needs to remain viable toward the early 2030s, by which point the oldest boat will have served for nearly 4 decades. During that bridge period, HMS Vanguard spent more than 7 years in deep maintenance after a refit planned for 3.5 years expanded to approximately 7.5. The other boats had to maintain a continuous deterrent mission with less margin for recovery, maintenance and disruption. This wasn't a confirmed collapse of CASD. Official sources continue to state that deterrent patrols have remained unbroken since 1969. It was a test of a system with very little spare capacity. The public evidence does not establish an American kill switch. It does not establish a formal US veto over a British launch. It does not establish a confirmed break in continuous deterrent patrols. The evidence does establish a British launch authority, a US-linked missile support structure, a common missile pool in Georgia, 4 life-extended Vanguard submarines, and a replacement class expected in the early 2030s amid recognized risks in skills, infrastructure, supply chains, costs, and delivery. Britain's deterrent isn't shown here to be under American launch command. Its practical resilience is nevertheless dependent on an American-supported missile system and on a 4-boat fleet that has been asked to serve far beyond its original 25-year design horizon. Somewhere beneath the sea, one Vanguard-class submarine remains on patrol. Behind it are 58 missile bodies in a pool at Kings Bay, a 7.5-year refit at Devonport, warhead work at Aldermaston and Burfield, 4 aging boats at Clyde, and 4 unfinished replacements at Barrow, waiting for the early 2030s.